I was secretly earning $0.0000000 when my husband asked for a divorce. He said he didn't want a wife who didn't work. Later, he married my best friend, and karma caught up with him. He went pale after not seeing me for a month. Jan simply tossed me the business card of a divorce lawyer without even asking, "Are you okay?" or "How do you feel?" He said, "Divorcing a wife who doesn't work? Pay me $1,000 a month in alimony. Sounds good?" Jan laughed while saying this, and standing beside him, Emily linked her arm with his, showing an equally arrogant expression. "All right, then, let's divorce," I said so casually that Jan seemed a little surprised, but he quickly shared a smile with Emily. Good thing Jan doesn't think much about it, I thought. This makes my plan easier. And after the divorce papers were approved, I decided to start my revenge plan against both of them. I would make them cry. My name is Sarah Wolf. I'm a 47-year-old illustrator and also a children's book author. I love drawing. I have 2 childhood friends, Jan and Emily. They were important friends to me, and Jan was also my husband. Everything started when Jan asked me out, just as I was heading to a different university after high school. I was surprised. I thought he was interested in Emily, but I couldn't say no to a confession from Jan, whom I had secretly been in love with. After thinking it over and consulting with Emily, I accepted Jan's proposal. Emily's behavior had been somewhat problematic since our teenage years, but she remained a dear friend to both Jan and me. However, Emily had a tendency to steal other people's boyfriends and then leave them once they became obsessed with her, causing problems repeatedly. Her parents were worried, so Jan and I spent time with her to look after her. Jan and I got married when we were 25. 4 years later, Emily brought her fiancé into our lives. His name was George, a professional working for a top-tier company. Nice to meet you, Sarah. Jan, I've heard a lot about you too. I look forward to our future together, said George, very polite. We all got along immediately. We would meet during vacations and holidays, taking trips or long train rides to enjoy a few drinks. However, things began to fall apart when Emily got pregnant 2 years after her marriage. Jan and I originally had many siblings, so we didn't worry about having heirs, and we decided we didn't need children. We both loved kids but weren't interested in actively taking care of them. Besides, we loved our freedom to travel and enjoy drinks. We often found it touching to see families with kids, but it was never more than that. When Emily announced her pregnancy, Jan's attitude began to change. He quit smoking because Emily said she couldn't stand the smell and even offered to take her to her medical appointments using his vacation days. I warned him, George might get upset if you're always with Emily, but Jan responded, you have a job, don't you? She's our childhood friend and is asking for help. You're being insensitive. I told him, I've been buying things and helping where I can, but accompanying her to the obstetrician is crossing a line. When I said that, Jan frowned and gave me a look of displeasure. Why? Because Emily wants it. She says she's anxious about the consultation. I can't let her go alone, said Jan. If she's anxious, George should go with her, I replied. Don't you think? If you're always going with her, it almost seems like you're the father of the baby she's carrying, I added, upset. Jealous? You're not going to get pregnant anyway, so what's the problem? Jan didn't take my concerns seriously and started arguing with me, saying I was being bothersome. We had almost never fought during our marriage, but things changed when Emily got pregnant. Our arguments increased, and that didn't change even after Emily gave birth. In fact, Jan began spending even more time with Emily and her daughter Emma. But when Emma turned 6, an incident occurred regarding the attendees at her graduation ceremony. The day before the graduation, Jan suddenly started rummaging in the closet. What are you doing? I asked. I don't know, just deciding what to wear for the graduation ceremony, Jan casually replied. What? Are you really thinking of attending the graduation? I asked incredulously. Yes, George can't go. Emily asked me, he responded. Wait, that's ridiculous. No matter how you look at it, I raised my voice in disbelief. Jan's face immediately soured. I knew he occasionally picked Emma up from kindergarten, and I had done so too when asked, but it was absurd for a childhood friend who wasn't even the biological father to attend the graduation ceremony. You still doubt me and Emily? I'm disappointed that you can't even help, said Jan. That's not the point. Anyway, I'm going to the graduation tomorrow, so iron a shirt, Jan said, abruptly ending the conversation and heading to the bedroom. I had no choice but to call Emily. Hey Emily, about tomorrow. Oh, sorry about tomorrow. I'm borrowing Jan, she said. But won't George be upset about not attending the graduation? I asked. Sarah, what are you talking about? Obviously, I haven't told George about the graduation. I'll tell him after the ceremony, Emily said casually. I was shocked to learn that George didn't know anything about the graduation. Upon further investigation, it seemed Emily hadn't informed George of any kindergarten events until now, and Jan had been acting as the father at the kindergarten. I felt dizzy with the selfishness of the situation. Wait a minute, Emily, isn't that extremely irrational? It's disrespectful to George, just because he's a childhood friend, I argued. Sarah, you're scaring me. Well, see you tomorrow. Emily hung up the phone, leaving me trembling with anger. Still, in the end, I ironed Jan's shirt, prepared his tie, and the next morning, I watched him leave for Emma's graduation ceremony. From then on, Emily and Jan began going out more frequently, from once a month to once a week, then 3 times a week. Eventually, even George seemed to have some suspicions. One day, while Jan and Emily were out, George visited our house alone. Sorry for visiting so late. There's something that's been bothering me, George began. Is it about them? I asked. I'd like you to see this, George said as he showed me the GPS history he had installed in Emily's car. It showed that she had been staying at a hotel 3 times a week. All those days she was supposedly out with Jan. Just by looking at George's face, I understood what it meant. What do you want to do, George? I asked. I want to get back at them, George replied. Me too. I can't forgive them for betraying us after all this time. We started planning our revenge in secret. First, I began increasing my income because, having been focused on household chores and under Emma's care, my life took a drastic turn. As my income drastically decreased, George started working from home, and we took care of our home together. Neither Emily nor John realized that we knew about their affair, and we managed to gather solid evidence. Once we had enough proof and were ready for our revenge, we discovered a shocking truth about Emma. George and I wrestled with the decision, but we both agreed that we didn't want to hurt young Emma. So, we decided to wait until she was an adult to exact our revenge. However, despite our plan to endure for 10 years, I was diagnosed with a serious illness. I needed long-term hospitalization, and at best, I wouldn't be discharged for at least 2 years. While I could still work from my hospital room, it was clear I would have to reduce my workload. After informing George of the situation, I consulted with John. However, John's reaction was no different than when we discussed trivial matters. I'll visit you from time to time. I felt like John no longer had any affection for me, as he didn't even ask about my condition or the name of my illness. In reality, John only visited me once a month or every couple of months. After Emma's 15th birthday, she started acting strange. Although she used to visit me almost every day right after my hospitalization, she became distant after her birthday. Neither George nor I could figure out why, and we were puzzled. Even when we asked Emma, she only said, "Don't worry about it." However, we eventually found out the reason through John, who rarely showed up. "Hey, it's been a while." John, who had completely changed into a flashy appearance, entered without even knocking. After not seeing him for a month, he simply threw me a divorce lawyer's card without even asking. "Are you okay?" Or, "How are you feeling? Divorce from a wife who doesn't work?" Pay me $0 in alimony every month. That's the deal. Take care, John said, grinning from ear to ear. Beside him, Emily hugged him with a similar smile on her face. All right, let's get divorced then. I casually accepted, which seemed to surprise John for a moment. But he quickly exchanged smiles with Emily. It was fortunate that John wasn't the type to think too much, which is why my plan worked so well. After receiving notification that the divorce was finalized, I decided to start my plan for revenge against the two. I would make them cry as a celebration of my recovery. I quickly took action. First, I contacted George to switch hospitals. Then I informed my lawyer that he would be in charge of mediating between the two parties from now on. George also began acting at the same time, moving close to my new hospital with Emma and frequently visiting me. Emma still had a gloomy expression, but I was happy she came to see me every day. Most of my belongings were already in my hospital room, so I told John to get rid of the rest. I didn't want to bring anything that they could have touched into my new life. Once the hospital transfer and George and Emma's move were settled, I received a call from John. I had only left my seat for a few minutes, but my phone already showed 30 missed calls. I answered the call, feeling exasperated. What's going on? Hey, what the hell is happening? I could hear the voice of a concerned real estate agent behind John's panicked voice. I also heard Emily screaming, which made me feel a little guilty. What do you mean? What's happening? It's about the house, obviously. Why do we have to move out? John yelled as if it wasn't his fault at all. I calmly replied, obviously, because it's my house. John seemed to have completely forgotten, but the truth was that the house we lived in was a property I had rented as a workspace when I first started making a living as a freelancer. At that time, I didn't have enough income to maintain two homes, and John didn't have enough income to live on his own, so he ended up moving into my house. After hanging up the call with John, a slow smile spread across my face. He was finally starting to realize he was no longer in control. That was just the first strike of many George and I had planned. And that was the beauty of our revenge. It would be slow, meticulously executed, and, in the end, devastating for John and Emily. The next day, John called me again, this time with a voice full of desperation. Sarah, you can't just kick us out like this. Where are we supposed to go? We have nowhere to go. This isn't fair. I took a deep breath, savoring every word I was about to say. John, you and Emily betrayed me for years. Do you really think you deserve compassion? Besides, this is my house. You should have found another place to live by now. There was silence on the other end of the line. I knew he was processing every word. Finally, he said, Sarah, please, I'm begging you, think of Emma. Don't do this to her. I let out a soft laugh. Of course, he would use Emma as an excuse. Don't you dare involve Emma in this. You two have already caused enough damage in her life. Besides, where's George? Maybe you should ask him where Emma is going to live. Before he could respond, I hung up. John still didn't know that George had moved in with Emma, but he would soon find out. George and I had planned every detail so that both of them would feel the weight of their choices. The next part of the plan involved Emily, and that would be especially satisfying. Emily had always been a vain woman, obsessed with maintaining an impeccable image in front of everyone. She loved being the center of attention, and her career as an influencer depended on it. What she didn't know was that I had gathered a series of incriminating evidence against her, from compromising photos to messages she had exchanged with other men, including John during their affair. And all of it was about to be revealed to the world. With George's help, who had access to her social media, I started leaking the information little by little. First, an anonymous email to some companies she had sponsorship contracts with, then some images were posted in online gossip groups. It didn't take long for brands to start cutting ties with Emily. Her once adoring followers now criticized her, calling her a hypocrite and unfaithful. She tried to delete the posts and deny the rumors, but the damage was already done. Meanwhile, George was handling his part. He had initiated the process of divorcing Emily, and being a professional at an important company, he had the best lawyers at his disposal. Emily wouldn't have anything when the divorce was finalized. The house she lived in with John was also George's property. Soon, they wouldn't even have a roof over their heads. Desperate, John tried to visit me at the hospital. He showed up unannounced with a panicked expression I had never seen before. "Sarah, please, can we talk? I didn't know it would come to this. Can we find a solution? I'm so sorry for everything." I looked at him impassively. "Are you really sorry, John? Now you're sorry, after betraying me with Emily, after throwing away years of marriage for pure greed? I'm sorry, but your apologies come too late." He fell to his knees in front of me, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Sarah, I have no one left. Emily's ruined, and I don't know what to do." This was the scene I had imagined so many times. John, the arrogant man I once thought I loved, now on his knees begging for forgiveness. And I felt nothing but satisfaction. "Get up, John, it's pathetic to see you like this." My tone was cold and controlled. "You deserve every second of what's happening, and you should know this isn't over yet." In the following days, I continued to watch from a distance as John and Emily's lives fell apart. They lost their house, their reputation, and finally each other. Emily, without money or friends, was forced to return to her parents' house, who were already tired of her manipulations. John, on the other hand, was completely alone. George made sure he got nothing in the divorce process either. Meanwhile, my recovery was slow but steady. Every visit from George and Emma to the hospital brought me unexpected comfort. Emma, though young, began to open up more to me, and our conversations became one of the few peaceful moments amidst the storm. George and I, who initially were only allies in revenge, grew closer over time. I realized what I felt for him was more than just gratitude. One night, while sitting in the hospital, George took my hand and looked me in the eyes. "Sarah, I can't imagine how I would have gotten through all this without you. And now, I feel like there's something more between us." I smiled. "I feel it too, George." In the months that followed, George and I started to build a new life together. As for John and Emily, well, the last I heard, John was living in a small, cheap apartment far from the comfortable life he once knew. Emily, isolated and without prospects, seemed to finally be paying the price for her actions. Revenge was sweet, but more than that, I found something much more valuable: peace. And beside George and Emma, I knew my future would be bright, far from the shadows of the past that once haunted me. That was the best part of revenge. I won. They lost everything, and I gained something they could never understand: a second chance at happiness. The months following my revenge against John and Emily were a period of personal and professional rebirth. With George by my side, we began to invest wisely the money we had both accumulated over the years. I already had a solid financial foundation thanks to my work as an illustrator and children's book author, but with George's business advice and experience, we expanded even more. We invested in real estate, bought stocks, and even opened a small digital design company that I had always dreamed of. Our efforts quickly began to pay off. Our finances grew exponentially, and within a few months, we were living with a comfort I had never imagined. My health, which at first seemed like an obstacle, began to improve. The constant hospital visits diminished, and eventually, I was discharged. George and I moved into a large, modern house surrounded by gardens, with enough space for Emma to play and grow freely. Our life was serene, filled with travel, dinners with friends, and a routine that for many would be the pinnacle of happiness. But as they say, true peace rarely lasts forever. John and Emily, although they had destroyed their own lives, couldn't accept that I had moved on and thrived. They began to spread rumors. At first, it was discreet whispers, small social circles insinuating that I had stolen money from John during the marriage. Then, they began bad-mouthing me on social media, claiming I had manipulated George for financial gain and even distorting facts about our lifelong friendship. The attacks intensified. People who once supported me began to question me. Sarcastic and malicious comments started appearing on my posts, and the whispers turned into headlines in online gossip groups. Emily, always obsessed with her public image, seemed determined to paint me as the villain, even though I knew everything I had done was a fair response to the betrayal she and John had inflicted upon me. At first, I tried to ignore it. George reassured me, saying that those who truly mattered knew the truth. But the lies spread faster than I had imagined. People I hadn't seen in years began messaging me, asking about the rumors. Some of my clients started acting more reserved, and soon I realized that silence wouldn't be enough to handle the situation. That's when I decided to act. Unlike John and Emily, I had always been transparent about what was happening in my life, and throughout the betrayal and divorce, I had documented every step. I had messages, emails, photos, and videos that proved everything. The betrayal, John's visits to the hospital where I was admitted, the emotional abandonment, and above all, Emily's manipulations. One day, after weeks of watching the attacks pile up, I decided it was time to respond. Publicly. I made a long post on social media, something I rarely did. Enough of the silence, I wrote at the start, and then I let everything out. I explained how I had discovered the affair between John and Emily, how George and I had gathered evidence, how they had betrayed me for years while pretending to be our friends. I detailed the divorce and the revenge plan, but above all, I shared the evidence. I posted screenshots of conversations, photos of John and Emily leaving hotels, and emails proving that they both knew exactly what they were doing. Every piece of information was a bomb that destroyed a lie they had told. And at the end, I said something that had been eating at me for a long time. They tried to destroy me, but they failed. Now that I am at peace, thriving with my family and being happy, they are still trying to slander me. But the truth, that was always on my side. The post went viral within hours. People who had once looked at me with suspicion began sending me messages of support. Friends who had distanced themselves came back, apologizing for believing the lies. Clients who had gone quiet began sending me new contracts, praising my courage and resilience. The truth, in the end, had been revealed once and for all. I'd like to say that this closed the story for good, but John and Emily didn't give up so easily. Even after being publicly unmasked, they continued looking for ways to come out on top. Emily, always the manipulator, tried to position herself as the victim, claiming that my revelations were cruel and unnecessary. She just wants to destroy my life, she said in videos she posted on social media, with forced tears and self-pitying words. John, for his part, began spreading rumors that George and I had been together even before the divorce, insinuating that I had cheated on him, making him the real victim. It was pathetic to watch the expected attempt by two traitors to try and change the narrative, but the public had already seen the truth. And no matter how hard they tried, John and Emily couldn't erase the irrefutable proof I had shown. What bothered me the most, however, was their persistence in trying to maintain a false superiority, even from the bottom. They had lost everything: the house, the reputation, and finally, even the respect of the few friends they had left. And yet, they couldn't accept that their actions had led them to ruin. They wanted to drag me down, blame me for their failures, but I wouldn't yield. George and we kept growing, both financially and emotionally. Our investments thrived, our relationship blossomed, and Emma, now older, joined us in all of our adventures. We were building a future that John and Emily could never have imagined, while they sank deeper into their own lies and self-pity. I was living the life I had always deserved, surrounded by people who truly loved and respected me. The truth is, some people simply cannot stand the success of others, and John and Emily were exactly like that. Even months after being exposed, they kept trying to throw dirt at me, refusing to take responsibility for their own actions. But I wasn't going to waste another second of my life on them. I had won, and they knew it. In the end, the greatest punishment for John and Emily wasn't anything I did to them. It was the fact that no matter what they tried, I kept growing and thriving, and that, more than anything else, was something they simply couldn't bear.